All right, everybody, welcome back to Smells Like Infinite Sadness podcast. I'm your host, Michael Taylor, with my co-host, Chris Logan.
Howdy.
And if you are a regular listener, or even if you're not, what we do is cover the best of alternative rock from the 80s and 90s up to present day. We've also done a series for several years called Albums Revisited, where we like to look at seminal albums from the 80s and 90s. And today is the eve of the 30th anniversary of U2's Achtung Baby, which officially turns 30 tomorrow. Officially. And it came out in 1991, which you'll see in the blog post for this episode. I've got a list of all the best albums of 1991. 1991 was a major year for music.
It was a huge year.
I mean, so much good stuff, but at top of the list as far as noteworthy, and one that we just covered recently on an earlier episode, which I also will link to in the post, is Nirvana's Nevermind, which turned 30 just a few weeks ago, and was obviously a very revolutionary album that helped break Alternative Nation to the mainstream and Seattle and grunge. But because of that, it put a lot of European bands in a predicament, because for so long, alternative rock was kind of ruled by the Brits. I mean, you had like Depeche Mode and U2 and The Cure, Bauhaus, Jesus and Mary Chain.
Yeah.
You can name on and on. But it was, you had some American bands in the 80s like REM and The Replacements and Ministry and stuff like that. But by and large, most of the bands getting press were British bands. So Nirvana marked a turning point where it became much more American focused for a few years until Britpop came back, and then that kind of splintered everything.
That flipped the script.
But it put U2 in a predicament, because U2, were the biggest band of the 80s. Joshua Tree, that came out, 87 or 88?
87.
87. 87. Blew everybody's minds. They were another example. They were kind of like the pre-example of a Nirvana type act that came out from kind of the college rock circuit into becoming an arena rock, stadium filling bands. And
completely global at that point.
Yeah,
I mean,
they were
from just hitting on some regular rock stations with a couple of singles here and there, and then going global like they did was, that was rare. That was a rarity.
I mean, even your parents back in the 80s knew who U2 were. That's how big they were. So, but as often happens,
or your grandparents, depending on
depending
on who you are.
If your grandparents are hip, but But what was interesting was U2. The Joshua Tree was so huge, and the band got a reputation for being too serious and too political and all those kinds of things. So their next release was the album Rattle and Hum, which was also accompanied by a documentary. And as successful as Joshua Tree was, and all their other albums are building up to it, Rattle and Hum was it was just weird because the documentary was kind of a mess. It didn't really land for me. I saw it in the theater. I remember distinctly thinking, this is odd.
I liked it, but that's because whenever they cut to the Fort Worth Convention Center show, that's the way that I saw the show, pretty much.
That was the live stuff is great.
The view that you have watching them perform When Love Comes to Town in Rattle and Hum is pretty close to the view that I actually had. Like, I remember seeing lights follow them off the stage, which at this point you now know that their camera is following them off the stage, because then they go into that little room and they chat for just a minute. It's been years since I've seen the film, but I remember that distinctly. happening where they're getting followed off the stage, and then they're followed back, and then next thing you know, it's on. Holy cow! That's how I saw this show. So,
and the live stuff is definitely the best part of the documentary.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I mean that stuff is. I mean, like Helter Skelter, all that stuff is where it's at for me. The other stuff, where they got in trouble with the press and with some of the fans was that it felt like they were kind of co-opting American blues or trying to show like how it was done. It felt weird that there was like this ownership or something. Somehow it just did not translate well to the masses as far as them trying to to invest themselves in like America root rock and all that kind of stuff. So the album came out along with the documentary, and you had songs like Desire or Angel of Harlem. And I know you're a bigger U2 fan than me, so you may not agree, but I felt like a lot of those songs to me, they just felt, I don't want to say forced, but it felt ill fitting to me on some of the songs.
And there's a part of that I understand, because it doesn't necessarily feel natural. I do think it was like one of their big dreams, because they went to some studio and recorded a couple cuts. And who doesn't want to do that, especially whenever you're a 20-something-year-old Irish kid that is, finally big in the United States. I mean, you want to go do stuff like record at some studios, and the songs weren't top notch for sure. They almost at times kind of felt like B-sides within a sense.
Yeah.
Desire is probably the closest to an actual single out of that, but outside of that, like Angel of Harlem, man, I rarely keep that track on.
Yeah, I never have liked it. It's a little too saccharine for something. Yeah. Something it never took hold. But I think there is one song on that album that does bear mention, because one, it's a great song, but two, it kind of sort of shone a light to where they might be headed, and that was the God part.
I know exactly where you're going to go.
Yeah, God Part 2.
Oh, see, I thought you were going to go Hawk Moon 269.
Oh, there we go. So we got two different entry points here.
Either one of those, but yeah, God Part 2 probably leans closer. So I'm going to give you get the gold star for that one.
Because it had the dance beat. It had almost kind of like a hip hop thing in some of the vocals, or it was a good mix of elements. Not to mention, I mean, it's ballsy to try to make a sequel to a John Lennon song in and of itself, but the fact that it sounds so cool, and the fact that they didn't copy the music that John Lennon did, they just took the lyrical concept and expanded, which was clever. But I think that kind of showed where they could have gone. And I think, once the album came out and it came and went, and it kind of felt muted, and they didn't really get the impact they were looking for. Yeah. Then they decided they needed to reinvent themselves, to do something different. And that's when a couple years later, they wound up going to the same studio in, I believe it was Berlin, where David Bowie made his trilogy of albums with Brian Eno, who also co-produced The Joshua Tree with Daniel Lanois and Steve Lillywhite. And I don't think Flood has a producer's credit on the album, but I know he did engineer it. So his fingerprints are definitely there. And you can jump in whenever you want, but I think, they were kind of trying something different. I know The Edge and Bono were both really getting into industrial. They were really into like the baggy scene from England with like the Happy Mondays and Charlatans and all that kind of stuff. But Adam, the bass player, Adam Clayton, and Larry Mullins Jr., the drummer, weren't so keen on that. So it took a lot of it was kind of a lot of,
for sure.
Yeah, a lot of back and forth. And it's
the album that almost broke the band up.
Yeah,
that practically did break the band up. You know, they relocate to this studio, Hansa Studios in Berlin. Like you said, you know, I don't know if it's world known at that point because of David Bowie's Berlin triptych, but
and Iggy Pop too, right? That's where he recorded his stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He. What record did he record there?
I think it was The Idiot, right?
Yes, Idiot. That's it. Thank you. And so yeah, this was the proverbial line in the sand, the last straw, pretty much. They had hit such a artistic block because you had half the band wanting to go one way, and the other half thinking that they were just going to keep doing status quo, not the band, but the status quo of what U2 was.
Mm-hmm.
And so it basically came down to even a point to where I think they all had to take a break. They just had to like get away from each other because there was, you know, it became pretty aggressive to where I had read around through the years that Adam Clayton was just like, fine, you show me how to play that. I'm just in your band. And was very upset, very, very upset. Larry didn't know where he fit in during this early part of the session because they're listening to bands that were using drum machines. Well, I'm a drummer. You're going to replace me with a machine? What's next? You know? So it became a very, very early on in these sessions. It became just not a scene that you would have thought coming from U2 at all.
And there's a really good documentary about the making of this album, and I can't think of it. You remember the title of it? It was on Showtime about 10 years ago.
From the Sky Down.
Yes,
I remember it was a U2 club member. Like if you subscribe to their membership thing to get stuff, like I did at some points, then it was one of their like thank you gifts. Like you could get the DVD or something like that, or a soundtrack or something like that from it. And it focused on Achtung Baby, and I don't know why I didn't get it at that point, but I waited another gap year before I signed back up. But
it's really good.
So I've never seen it.
Oh, you haven't?
But
oh yeah.
No, I haven't.
Oh,
no.
you of all people you got to watch it. It's really good. It's a good fly in the wall kind of showing how they all.
No pun intended.
Yeah. How they all
fly on the wall.
Yeah. How they all got through it. But the one thing I remember distinctly, the thing that sticks out to me the most about the documentary was that they were really struggling with the songs and how to find a way to bring Larry and Adam into the fold and get them involved. And the one song that did it was One. One was the song that and maybe because it kind of had a sound that harkened back to the earlier U2 stuff, it's probably the more traditional U2 songs on the album, maybe in some ways. But I think that was such a powerful song, and I think if I had to pick one song off of Achtung Baby, especially as a single, I think One is probably their finest hour.
Right.
It just hits all the right notes. It's a beautiful song. It's emotive. It's got Bono singing at his best. It's got the Edge's cool little, very simple but melodic and emotive guitar solo. It's got the interesting synths in the background, and it's just it's just really powerful. It's funny.
It really is. And keep going.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's funny because my wife is not the biggest U2 fan. She's kind of like take them or leave them, but she loves one. We played it at our wedding. I mean, it's
oh wow, really?
It's a big one. So I think that, and obviously, not only did it help bring the band together, but it helped propel the album into the stratosphere. And of course, you still hear that on the radio. You still hear Mysterious Ways, and you still hear Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses. But one thing that bothers me a lot is the first single off that album is called The Fly. It's something that the band said was a sound of four guys chopping down the Joshua tree, which was a great statement. And the Fly is another one of my favorite U2 songs, but I do not understand how a song that was so popular back then, I never ever hear it on like First Wave. I never hear it on like older rock stations. They'll play everything else, but I don't know why that song has been kind of forgotten when it was so prominent when it first came out. It's weird.
Well, I don't think it charted very high. I mean, like it was not what you would consider a actual hit, and especially here in the United States. Because what I did today on a little background whenever we were talking about doing this is I looked at how did this go? I mean, we know Achtung Baby was a number one album, a Grammy winning album in '91, but what was it really like for a snapshot? So The Fly, it made it into the top 100. It peaked at 61.
Really?
On the charts. Yes. Now, if you want to dig a little deeper for like alternative airplay, yeah, it's going to hit number one. But at that point, I mean, shit. I mean, you could have a different number one every week in the alternative airplay. But for the Billboard Hot 100, it only went to 61 on that. So it was not. It might have been huge on alternative radio at that point, but that's it. That was as far as it went. Matter of fact, going back to one, it peaked at 10. It wasn't even a number one song in the United States. Not for 1 week. It peaked at number 10. And this is a song now that in retrospect, whenever you look at some like best in the 90s lists, it could be number one.
Was there any?
Number two,
Was there any?
In any countries?
Was there any songs off the album that did hit above 10 in the States in a Mysterious Ways chart higher? Or
Mysterious Ways, I think that was the one that charted the highest, and I think it went to 6. Let me look real quick, because I think that was the only one that was the highest charting song for YouTube. Actually 9.
9. And what about Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses? I guess that wasn't quite as big of a hit, but it was a hit.
I don't think that was that big of a hit.
Well, it's really
Billboard 35. And mind you, I am just going by the Hot 100, which is like an all-encompassing that includes alternative radio and pop radio and I guess adult-oriented radio, AOR, at that time. So, I mean, there wasn't like, even though the album was a number one album, and it did do that, but the singles themselves weren't the hit singles that they had previously from something like Joshua Tree, because I'll be honest, I didn't really look at Rattle and Hum, even though I'm pretty sure Desire charted pretty high, but I'd have to go back and research that one. But
that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
So I mean, yeah, and I'm gonna dig dig down another layer here. So I was thinking, so out of all the songs that U2 performs live, where, which one from Achtung Baby is, ranks the highest? And so I went to setlist.fm, which I don't know if anyone else uses that, but it's a great resource.
I use it all the time.
Old set lists. Yeah, me too. Practically every other day, if not daily. And one is the one song from this album that charts at number 7. Pride in the Name of Love is number 1. I Will Follow, number 2. Sunday Bloody Sunday, number 3. Where the Streets Have No Name, number 4. I'm missing a song on my list, With or Without You. So maybe it's the 6th most performed song. Can't believe that I left off one. I've written it down, but I mean, it's thematically with Achtung Baby. It was such a weird record because their previous albums were all pretty much like protest songs. Even up to Joshua Tree, there was, I mean, of course, Bullet the Blue Sky and One Tree Hill. I mean, within a sense, that's not really a protest song, but still, they had social consciousness. Dug deep into the lyrical content of these albums, and or just something that was part of their world. But Achtung Baby flipped the script, and they looked at themselves, and it's a lot darker of an album for sure, but it's also looking within them. And I think the song One really dealt with the relationship that they were having, maybe not just with a partner or themselves, but I think the reason why One still works today is because it can be translated into a global sense. And so One is still going to be played in practically every show that they play, because they can tune that in and turn the lyrics from what may have started out as a little bit more of a personal song into a more communal type of song.
Yeah, and and I realized that also the Edges was going through a divorce at the time, so I think a lot of that kind of informs the album.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to mention briefly, just dealing with this, and since we're talking about the 90s and all that, if you can find it on YouTube, there is an amazing video of Chris Cornell, who said he was doing some covers live, and he does great. He did great covers, and he was going to do U2's One, and he goes, the thing is, guys, when I tried to find the lyrics online, instead I came across the lyrics to Metallica's One. He's like, and then I thought, what if I put them together? And he sang U2's One with Metallica's lyrics, and it was incredible. He made it fit. He put every single lyric from Metallica's One over the chords of U2's One, and it gave me the chills.
Wow.
It's really, if you definitely before you go to bed tonight, check that out, because it is
absolutely.
I mean, not only does it make me miss that guy already more than I already do, it's just he could have done it as a total joke, right? But he did it straight, and it worked. So everybody out there, go to YouTube tonight and Google YouTube, go to Chris Cornell One U2 Metallica or something like that, and you'll find it. It's worth the listen. But I think
very cool.
Yeah. And I think if they let off with the one single, it would have done well. But I think why it was so cool they went with The Fly, because when you saw that, and think about The Fly, the music video was perfect too, because you see they're dressed in leather. Bono's got on his shades that he still wears some version of to this day, sunglasses. He's got his hair slicked back. The Edge has got a beanie and a goatee. I mean, they were definitely looking more 90s here. They were kind of getting into that look, and the song was very off the cuff. It was kind of dismissive. It was kind of a protest against them being protesters, just kind of taking the air out of it. And then you had the industrial riff. You had what I think is probably the Edge's best solo in any song. That was one of the first guitar solos I learned how to play on the guitar. I love that guitar solo so much. But I think it was a great way to be like, okay, this is not your brother or sister's U2. This is not going to be the Joshua Tree 2.0. No. This is going to be something different. And either you're on the bus or you're getting off, but this is what you're going to sign up for if you want to get the album. And I thought that was
very true.
It was great. And then when you bought the album, as I bought it on the release day, which I'm sure you did too.
Oh yeah.
The opening track was another kind of rude awakening in a great way, Zoo Station, which starts off with this big guttural, like echoey transistor sounding guitar. And it was interesting because it was industrial, but it has this really gentle melody line and gentle vocals, even though they're distorted. It's not like they're trying to be like Ministry, but it's like their own version of industrial, where it has like, kind of I can't quite describe it, but it was a very unique way of trying those elements into a song without.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to.
Yeah. And it was such, what a fun time the Edge must have had, because he was really starting to get into his guitar sounds and utilizing technology to manipulate just what comes out of his instrument. Did you ever see the It Might Get Loud?
I did. I did. I loved it. And
I think I'm thinking that it was gosh, I'm not even sure which track it was, but off of Achtung Baby. But I remember he's standing there with this processor that's taking these sounds and it's manipulating it, but then he plays it clean, like, hey, I got this great riff, and it was like ding 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 ding, and then he flips the switch, and then it turns into dun 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 dun, and it completely is. Oh, I know that song because clean, and he just goes, hey, I got this great riff, your 12-year-old cousin who first got a guitar goes ding 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 ding,
mm-hmm.
But utilizing technology, which I think this is what has broken that line pretty much, because they weren't really known for using a lot of technology. They were just a straight up rock and roll band. There's nothing wrong with that, but being able to look forward and create a sound that's going to keep them as artists interested in their craft. I think this is the path that they chose.
Yeah.
We all like AC/DC, and they can sound like AC/DC, or they can create Joshua Tree, 13.2. That's fine. But after a while, I think as listeners, we may go, you got anything else? Yeah,
because it's like sometimes you need to be challenged. It's like I don't always want. Yeah, to me, some of my favorite albums are the albums when I first hear it and I don't like it. I've had a habit, especially with bands like The Church or just certain bands. I'll buy an album, I'm like, I don't. But then you listen to it again, and you start seeing all the different elements come out. So sometimes the songs that aren't immediately lodged in your brain, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think Achtung Baby is an album like that once you kind of got used to the fact that they weren't playing by their usual rule book, you kind of allowed it to kind of wash over you and take it all in. And I think that was a big part of why it was so cool. And, you had all the singles, you had Mysterious Ways, you had all that stuff. But I think just as important to me about that album, I think the deep cuts are some of their best.
Oh yeah.
So cruel. Yeah. So Cruel might be my favorite.
So Cruel.
One of my favorites. Just because it's just got that emotive quality. I thought it was so perfect when Depeche Mode covered it a few years back, because that was a perfect choice.
Oh yeah,
to do that, because it almost sounds kind of like a Depeche Mode song in the first place. It
really does. And in my research of song statistics at setlist.fm, they've only played that song 3 times.
Weird.
Which I thought was really, it threw me off completely. I mean, they've only played So Cruel 3 times since the release of this album. So
maybe because it's a slower song and it's kind of based on piano. Maybe it's just not as much fun to play live. Maybe
I'm not sure. You know, the last time that I saw U2, you know, we had to go to Nashville, and I don't remember Experience and Innocence and Experience tour. I don't know. It was at the Bridgestone Arena. It's a great show, great fucking show, absolutely, hands down. But they played Acrobat, which that was something that they had rarely played before, but they made a effort to incorporate Acrobat into that, at least the leg of the tour that I was seeing. So I got to see them perform Acrobat, which, I mean, mind you, it's on my sliding scale, it's probably the one that I would want to see the least, honestly, but I can mark it off my list. Because right now, I think So Cruel is probably the only one that I haven't seen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, I remember there was that line in that song about you can swallow or you can spit or turn around and choke on it, I think. And then you had that line in Mysterious Ways about on your knees. There's like so many references to that album that could be construed as oral sex. And I think Bono was like, I had no idea that's what people would come up with for that. I did not intend it that way. But it was like, I think.
They knew. They knew exactly what they were doing.
Because I think there was another thing that could be construed for that on Until the End of the World. I think I may be wrong, but because it's and also in one about you have a bad taste in your mouth. I mean, there's so many different things that could be seen that way. But and of course,
the innuendo on this record is, I mean, the meter is off the charts for innuendo on this record for sure. And it goes back to just thematically what they were going through. I mean, or what they were progressing with, instead of, you know, throwing rocks at you know, I don't know, the authorities or whatever they are, you know, and holding their protest signs. They stayed in, and they opened a bottle of wine, and they started trying to figure out why did she leave me this time. And just, I mean, it was introspective. It was dense, but it really had to do a lot more with internal. I think, in like what they were really thinking of for how they dealt with the relationships, and so there's going to be the innuendo about, you know, on your knees, boy, and all that, you know.
Well,
but you know, it hits on so many different themes that weren't having to do with, like, you know, free birth control or anything.
Yeah,
doing that.
It was refreshing in that way. Wasn't the original title of the album going to be "Fear of Women"? Am I right about that? I thought that's what I heard one time. It was supposed to be
that? I don't. I've not heard that one.
Let me see if I can. I can find.
I've not heard that one.
Fear of Women. Could have sworn I read that a long time ago. Let's see. Yeah, proposed title for the album is "Fear of Women." This is talking about.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Yeah.
So,
there you go.
And you could tell, because I mean, "Love Is Blindness" is the album closer, and it's about as bleak of an album closer as U2 could ever do. I mean, it's beautiful. I love Jack White's cover of that song too. But
that was that was the last song they played in their main set for that tour, and it sticks with me to this day. It is still one of, I mean, it like you said, it's bleak, and it is. There's not really a lot of happy going on in that song, but that song, as far as ending their main set, was absolutely incredible.
Well,
it's absolutely incredible.
I think we're talking about how they tried to take on the blues and Rattle and Hum and largely failed. I think you could argue that this was the best blues song they ever did, because the blues are very strong in this song, but it doesn't feel hackneyed. It feels tied into the sound of the album, where it's not trying to be like a blues pastiche. It just has a bluesy progression. And
yeah,
it's very dour and dark and cinematic. It's just great. But I mean, there's so many good songs. Ultraviolet, Light My Way. I don't know why that was never a single. That seems to me.
Oh, me neither.
That seems so confusing to me. That, I mean, one of their catchiest songs, and maybe the song of the album that's the closest composition wise to some of their older stuff. Just because you two have this very. It's hard to explain because I'm not. I mean, I play music, but I'm not the best at describing music. But they had this really great way of having like a bass loop, and then the guitar is subtly changing over the bass, so it has this really weird way, almost like a tractor beam, where it kind of lulls into this trance, where it's like this push pull, and that's a great example. Yeah. And another great example is With or Without You, where they've got the hypnotic bass and the guitar is slowly changing over the song. So that's a really good example of that. And I almost wonder too because I know before this album they did some weird musical where it was like based off of Clockwork Orange, and they did that song Alex Alex in a bottle of milk, and
Alex gets a bottle of milk,
or
something like that,
which is a really cool experience.
Probably.
And that was
probably a good thing that it kind of missed a little bit, so that they could throw some of that on the B side or something.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that also was kind of helped influence sound the album. But I always kind of wondered if Ultraviolet was kind of like a play off Ultraviolence and was about a Clockwork Orange. But I have no idea. I just wondered if it kind of had that
good point. Yeah,
feeling. But you've got there's only two songs I didn't care for in this album. One was Trying to Throw Your Arms Around the World. I never liked that very much. The woman, the fish riding a bicycle. It's not his best lyrics.
And, woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle.
Yeah, just not one.
Yeah.
And then I liked their dance remix, but I was never a big fan of the original version of Even Better Than the Real Thing. It just kind of, it never hit me that hard. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. It's just kind of, it seems a little bit kind of rote for them, but that was a big single for them too.
I think that from another close friend of mine, who's probably, I'm going to go ahead and say it just to stroke his ego, but he's probably a bigger U2 fan than I am. That's I believe is his least favorite song, is Even Better Than the Real Thing. He just can't. He can't deal with it. He just can't.
Yeah, I
on the other hand, I'm like, you know what? I'm just trying to get to one. Actually, I'm trying to get until the end of the world. I'll just let it go. I'm just going to let it. I'm still going to listen. I'm still going to tune in because look, for me, over the years, in my aged form that I am now, as opposed to what I was in '91, I'm still going with, or I started to go with, you know what? It's better to have a bad U2 song than no U2 song. And I've said that about Iron Maiden. I've said that about Slayer. I have a handful of other bands. Radiohead's probably in that these days, but I'd rather have music from them than not have music from them. And so I will just let stuff keep playing, just keep going. I have a different stop that I want to really get to, but you know what? You be you, even better than the real thing. Let's go.
Yeah, it like I say, it's not it just doesn't feel as immediate, perhaps, to me, some of the other stuff does. But I did want to touch on briefly Until the End of the World you're mentioning, which is another great song. I think what a lot of people may not remember, or have never heard before at all, was that song was used as the title track for a soundtrack by a film from director Wim Wenders, which was a really great soundtrack. It had like Lou Reed and Nick Cave and REM and
Depeche Mode.
Yeah, Depeche Mode.
Depeche Mode. They had Death's Door on that, didn't they?
Yep. Julie Cruz.
Great soundtrack.
Fear and what was that band's name? Crime and the City Solution, which is a really cool.
Crime and the City Solution. Oh yeah, I love those guys.
But that was a really cool soundtrack. I never saw the movie, which was the case for a lot of '90s soundtracks. Where I had the soundtrack, like Judgment Night. I eventually saw that movie, and I wish that I hadn't, because the soundtrack was just fine. Didn't need a movie. But that was really the era for soundtracks, where they would push those out, and you'd have like The Last Action Hero with 2 songs by Alice in Chains on it that I'd buy just for that. But I never bothered seeing the movie. But I think that goes to show that the band is a very cinematic band, and this is a very cinematic album. The music videos were done very artfully and helped expand upon the sound of it, and this also helped set the stage for their next album, Zooropa, which I think is another underrated record. So it kind of just showed that this was their new sandbox they were playing with, and they were going to keep trying this for a while. Eventually they would go back to their standard sound, but for the 90s was definitely their most adventurous as far as musical risks that they were taking. And I think that it just, it paid off. And I think it's kind of amazing because so many other bands from that era, the 90s weren't very kind to them, I mean, bands like the Church and the Cult, they had a rough time in the 90s.
A lot of them did. I mean, like The Cure had a terrible time in the 90s, if you ask me, as well. The U2's output in the 90s, while as limited, but because it was a different era too, to where it wasn't just like album tour. They finally kind of pulled the reins back. They only put 3 records out in the 90s, and Achtung Baby, Zooropa, kind of out of the same sessions, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
At least ideas for Zooropa came out of Achtung Baby. So that was initially just supposed to be an EP turned into an album because they started to develop. And I think they got really comfortable on tour with Achtung Baby, because that's another point on this album, is that the way that it translated in a live setting was spectacular. It really overperformed.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I shouldn't say overperformed, but it works so well live. And I think that everybody in the band that had already kind of, come at peace with each other about, where are we going? What are we doing? What do I have to do? What's my role here?
And
by the time that they were doing these live, I mean, it was just incredible stuff.
Yeah, because the whole Zoo TV tour thing was like a big cultural event. Huge. They're doing stuff like ordering pizza, sending it to the White House, and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. And you really saw in the live show Bono going even further, kind of deconstructing his character into this. And sometimes it was a little lead and foot, kind of a little heavy handed, even trying to be funny. They weren't always, it was kind of clunky at times, but I think the whole, by the time we got to Mephisto, I was like, I don't know about this, but that was a little strange for me. But I thought that the Fly character and kind of doing that whole new thing and working with really complicated stage rigs and all that, it worked very well for this album. It was
absolutely.
It was a great.
And I honestly think that's some of the best stuff that came out of it, because like even the last time that I saw them in Nashville, Mephisto made an appearance as like a little filter, because of course they're using technology at its highest grade right now for their live shows, and so they had like a filter for Bono whenever he was going into his Mephisto character, instead of like having to go back and face paint and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a fun throwback for 20, what was that? 18, 17 at this point. So, I mean, it may have seemed a little campy now, but now whenever it shows up, you're like, holy cow, they brought back fill in the blank of character, the Fly, Mephisto, or, Preacher Man, or I don't know, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what they call these characters?
Yeah.
But it's fun now whenever they kind of show back up in some sort of capacity.
I mean, the one thing that holds true for this album is that they never really, I don't think to this point, reinvented themselves to this degree, because Zooropa was basically still on the tail end of this. And then Pop was really a lot of elements from that too. It was kind of mining the same thing, just going. So, after those albums, and especially after Pop kind of didn't do so great for them, they kind of retreated and went back into their more classic sound. But I kind of miss those.
Yeah, they went a little bit more traditional. Yeah, I'm with you, because I kind of think Pop is underrated, but that's just me.
Yeah, I do.
There's some great songs on that.
Oh yeah,
fantastic songs on that.
I think Pop is a really good album, but I just kind of regret that they haven't really. I don't think at this stage in the game you're going to see them do something that's going to be that much of an about face to what they did before. Now they're kind of in legacy act mode, which it happens to a lot of bands at their.
That's fine. Yeah,
and they're one of.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at this point. So,
and I think it's pretty remarkable that they're one of the few bands that never lost a member, never changed a member. And I think a testament to that is them getting through this album together. That kind of show that these guys are in for the long haul, that they were still, to be high schoolmates and still be this thing together. It's pretty special. And I don't think they get enough credit for that, for just sticking to it. And I think that, in retrospect, I think Achtung Baby still holds up really well, which is leading up to my big question, my big debate. What's the better album, Achtung Baby or The Joshua Tree? The Joshua Tree's got a lot of great songs, and it was the one album that made them the biggest band in the world. But Achtung Baby is the band that reinvented themselves and made them a band for a new decade. So
whenever I think I made a similar sound whenever you told me that was going to be like the last question, really. And so I've kind of been fighting it off in my head, because there's too much. There's a lot that I just adore from Joshua Tree. But then I think about the artist that created an album like Joshua Tree, and then nearly broke up and stuck its neck out, and then came back together as a full unit, and put together a stellar album like Achtung Baby. Man, I don't even know. I mean, I'm working on two totally different planes on this. You got to answer first. How's that go?
Okay. Well, I will say, like I said before, I was never the biggest U2 fan. I've always appreciated them. I remember hearing them first when I was in high school and maybe junior high when we first heard them back in like the Gloria days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they kind of were,
I will follow.
Yeah. And they kind of had that undercurrent where they were getting more stuff. And then the Joshua Tree came out in a big way. I remember I got my Columbia House tape deal and they were one of the tapes that I got. And then I backtracked and got Unforgettable.
$35.
Mm-hmm. And then I copied Unforgettable Fire from a friend of mine and all that. So,
right.
But I think Achtung Baby was really the album that made me a bigger fan. I think that it grabbed me in different ways because it was using some different sonic stuff that I was really into at the time. And I really liked the whole mix of like rock and dance music and I was already getting into that with like Depeche Mode and with Ministry. So I thought it was really cool hearing their take on it. So I think to me it's Achtung Baby, no question. If you said pick an album, that's the one I'm going with. I just think that it's something that I listen to more often. I mean, I can count, I listen to the Joshua Tree plenty, but I listen to Achtung Baby way, way more.
So on a typical day, I usually tell people that it's Unforgettable Fire. I will say that. But kind of like whenever we were pre-gaming for this, I was like about how Achtung Baby could really be my next go-to after that. And so this week, like I said earlier, it's Achtung Baby. And next week it may be Unforgettable Fire. But then Joshua Tree, I mean, we're talking about 1A, B, and C for me. Just depending on where I'm at, But since, I mean, I was even prepping for, without us even talking about doing this episode, but like listening to Achtung Baby like a week or two ago. Because I was like, oh, it's getting close to that anniversary, isn't it? Because my little music store mind flips to like November of, well, practically any year from 1990 until about 2003 or so. And so I start looking at those albums and, Joshua Tree's it is a great record, but I, for one, this week will certainly say Achtung Baby. And then maybe next week I'll be listening to Unforgettable Fire. Who knows?
All I know is I wish I could get a promo copy of the upcoming deluxe reissue that's coming out next month because it looks pretty sweet. There's a ton of stuff on there. Pretty much all the songs that we were discussing as far as like the Alex, that song and all that. And
yeah.
And it's also worth mentioning, as far as B-sides, the album had a very great B-side, one so good. I don't know why they didn't replace either Better Than the Real Thing or Arms Around the World with this. Salome. Salome is such a good song.
Oh, Salome, that is so good.
I don't know why that was not a single. It's such a good dance song, It was really good. So if they definitely should switch out one of those songs for that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, Salome is certainly a great song. I also whenever I was looking at this, and I don't know if you ran across it too, but do you remember seeing they had done a Cole Porter cover called Night and Day.
Oh, I love that cover.
And it was supposed to be that was originally for one of those Red Hot and Blues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember
singles, but that came out like a month or so before they even started sessions for this. And remember how different that song sounded. Like this was not Angel of Harlem. This was not Angel of Harlem or Desire-U2.
Or
go back and listen to
Christmas.
Night and Day. Yeah. Merry Christmas, Baby.
Yeah.
This was not. Yeah, this was not traditional U2. Go back and listen to that. And then you start thinking about, hey, what are they about to do? That was the think of it as the mint before your meal in reverse.
That cover, it's one of those songs. That part toward the end where his voice breaks and it gets really high. I mean, that always gives me the chills. Like just that whole end part where he's just going, oh, just that really big moment towards the end. That's just like, that's the best part of U2 when they hit those kind of moments.
Yeah.
And, they made Frank Sinatra cool for the 90s. So yeah, I do like that cover. And, that maybe we should have all taken that as a sign of things to come. That was the direction. And hats off to Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois and Flood and Steve Lillywhite and all their production team for
all those guys
for going with it and using the studio as a instrument and pushing the sounds to the breaking point.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuff that Flood did in that album, I think he kind of took a lot of that for when Depeche Mode did Songs of Faith and Devotion, with another album I love, where I think he really that was kind of their Achtung Baby to me in some ways. It was like I
agree with that.
It was like the opposite of what Achtung Baby was. Was an organic rock band moving towards being electronic, where Songs of Faith and Devotion was electronic man moving towards being organic rock. So I think it's kind of like a weird flip mirror side to the whole thing, which is, just an observation that came across my mind. But
can you imagine Martin's face? Well, Bono did this. Oh.
Yeah, I know. They never admitted, if nothing else. I just remember bringing.
That's the stuff that I secretly think of as like whenever Flood's working with, another international, just globally impactful band like from U2 to Depeche Mode, and then
Pumpkins.
Him going, well, The Edge did this.
Well, I remember, I think he was talking about the Depeche Mode album. He says, why can't you have wah-wah drums as Flood? Why can't you do that? I want to do wah-wah drums. I mean, just that kind of mind is so great that you're willing to think of like crazy things like that and playing with sounds that, now you can get all these sounds through like a software program, but back then, you really had there's a lot of trial and error, and
it was a different time.
it was, and I think it kind of forced you to if you had a lot of money getting a studio, mind you, it forced you to really try to push it, and they pushed it, and as time is it's to the test of time. It's still a great album. We're still talking about it.
It's still a fantastic album. Yeah,
and
agreed.
You can't think of the early 90s without still thinking of U2. They pulled it off. They did not fade away. They did not have to go on the intimate club tour that bands like INXS had to do. No. Which
they didn't have to play a state fair.
Yeah, they really were fortunate to be able to do that, but it was also because they were willing to push it. I think that they were able to get that luxury of sticking around for another decade and being huge. So yeah,
absolutely agree. I'll still pay to go see. That's one of the bands I will still go and pay to see. Just tell me what I prefer to be on the floor because hey, that's where I belong, right?
It's one of my biggest regrets. I've never seen him live, and I hate even saying that on this thing. But I've meant to go see him, and it never has worked out. It's one of those things like Ministry.
Well, and I got to tell you, on even the last tour, whenever I said that I had to go to Nashville because they didn't play here, They came here for their Joshua Tree redo tour, like in 2017, but that's been it. That's the last time they've been here. They've been on tour, but for the last 2 albums that they put out, the Songs of Experience and Songs of Innocence, they have not hit the Dallas market, or the DFW market. I'm not even sure if they played Texas at all. I'm not sure if they've even done Houston.
Can you blame them?
Well, I mean, at the same time, I mean, they came here for Joshua Tree, so I mean,
but that I don't know. I'm just saying from Texas has become.
I know where you're going with it for sure. Come on.
It's like
I mean, don't get me wrong. I will. You know what? They played Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They played Tulsa, Oklahoma, but couldn't find the time to make it down here. Okay, whatever. I'll go. I tried to go see him in St. Louis. That didn't work out because something happened, so they had to cancel that show. But then I ended up seeing them in Nashville. So there you go.
Oh, maybe
it is what it is.
Maybe next time they will hit here, but I'm afraid
it will just have to be. It will just have to be the next time.
I'm just kind of afraid
if
that
they play Austin, then I will come down. If they come down and if they play Austin and not here, then I will come and go see that show with you.
All right. Yeah, if they come to Austin, I will definitely go. I'm just afraid that a lot of good bands aren't going to want to play Texas ever again after we've been pulling lately. I'm afraid that we're going to, even though it's not our fault, we're going to be held liable for boycotts.
It's going to be a long winter.
Yeah. Oh God, hopefully not in certain ways either. Yeah, Texas, folks. Yeah. We're living it.
Texas.
But yeah, Achtung Baby still holds up, putting out deluxe reissue next month. If you guys want to pick up the new album, I've got a link for it when you see the blog post for this. But
should buy it.
Yeah, I'm going to put it on my Christmas list, and
do it.
You should too. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. I think it's going to cover all of our anniversary albums for this year, but I will start soon looking into what's going to be turning 25 and 20 and 30 and all that stuff for 2022. And we'll
might be a slow year, might be a slow one.
I
think we picked back up at 90 well, at least I know 93 is kind of big, but I mean, hey,
92 is pretty big.
Not as big as 91. Was it? Okay.
92. Okay. Yeah, 92 was. In fact, I'll if I can find my thing I did for it, I'll send it to you. 92 had a lot of stuff. It was kind of building on the backs of 91.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean this 30-year stuff right now is in a sweet spot. So
we'll definitely hit some. There was some Dirt and some Terrible Thing to Taste and Priest Equals Aura. Honey's Dead. There was quite a few good ones from 92. So.
Oh yeah.
Angel Dust.
That is some good stuff. Oh, yeah. Never mind.
So we'll definitely...
92 is big.
We'll definitely dive into
and that's just the 30-year stuff.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the 20-year, the 25-year. I think, yeah. So we will definitely... I think next year is the 20th anniversary. Go ahead.
We should start looking at 40.
Yeah.
Just to make it fun.
Yeah, we should. We should dig into...
I'll look at the 40-year stuff because that should be kind of fun too.
And there's some major tentpole albums from those early 80s years. So
yep.
So that could be
absolutely
fun dive into the new wave and metal and all that stuff. So yeah, let's definitely do that.
Absolutely.
So we shall make a list, everybody. So be sure to tune back in next year.
Right.
And
we'll have to put on our big boy pants and get at it.
That's right. Well, thank you, Chris, as always. Always a pleasure talking music with you.
You betcha, man.
I'm glad we can make this work.
Great to be part of it.
Yes, and we will.
Absolutely.
We'll do it again soon.
Absolutely.